Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day 2 afternoon sessions of the Maryland Virtual Training Institute. I'm Laura Ostrowski with the Maryland Department of Labor, and I'm so pleased to be here today with Marquita Johl, an adjunct instructor for many of our programs I'm learning across Maryland, as well as founder of thisisenglish.org. Before we switch over to Marquita, let me just go ahead and launch a quick poll to see who's in the room with us. So if you can take a moment and just fill in, select your role within adult education. We'll try to get up to 85% completion. Let's see. Might have to settle with 82. Oh, 84. All right, let's go ahead and share those results. So 66%, 2/3, I guess that would be, instructors, program administrators, instructional specialists, and transition specialists, and other also present. So again, good to see everyone. Nice to be here this afternoon, and nice to be here with Marquita. Marquita, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Laura. All right, so welcome everyone. My name's Marquita Johl, and as Laura stated, I'm an adjunct professor or instructor with many organizations, as you'll see shortly. So just a disclaimer, the content or opinions expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect or present the views, positions, or policies of the Maryland Department of Labor, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or other organizations imply an official endorsement by the Maryland Department of Labor. All right, so we did the quick poll. So just going to give you a kind of an overview of what we're going to cover today. Just going to give a short bio and background on myself, and then go into a little bit about why I use Google Apps, what are some of the biggest technology pitfalls that we face in the classroom, also talking a little bit about virtual and in-person management, and then I will jump into the ways in which we can use Google Apps in the classroom. So forms, slides, Google Docs, Google Sheets. So I'll explain a little bit of how to set it up, also throw in some tips and reminders, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of a chance to test it for yourself at the end, or at least that's the goal. All right. So just a quick background about me. I've been teaching ESL for 17 years. I've taught English for the first time in Beijing, China in 2005. I taught there at VTI, which is Peking University, and I was there for 6 weeks. It was an amazing time. I would always go back to China in a heartbeat if I could. My bachelor's degree and background is in communication and English, and my master's degree is in education with a specialization in instructional technology. So I've taught all levels of English, civics, citizenship, entrepreneurship, journalism, ABE courses, pre and GED courses, and all types of levels of ESOL, as well as workforce training. And I have a heavy call center customer service background. So I recently actually left my corporate gig. So I've been in and out of adult ed for pretty much the last 17 years, usually as a part-time job, but I decided to move into full-time. So this last semester and this semester, I'm working with several colleges and organizations in the area, including Howard Community College, Hartford Community College, CCBC, Prince George's Community College, and LCMC, the Literacy Council of Montgomery County. Also, recently, I'm in the process of doing my own online English school called thisisenglish.org. So definitely check it out. If you have information about one of your programs, I'll be happy to add it to my website so that it can be a good resource for our students as well as our teachers. So basically, we empower communities of women to thrive, live out their unlimited potential, personal development, workforce development through English proficiency, soft skills, digital literacy, and micro-credentialing. All right, so enough about me. Let's jump into it. Why use Google Apps? So unfortunately, I remember when Google was born. So I've been with Google since the beginning of Google. And then I've been using Google Drive pretty much exclusively to organize materials for my classes, to build worksheets, as well as the Google Apps to organize content. And then I've also used it to share content and curriculum with other teachers and other organizations and with fellow teachers. And the best thing about it, it is free. So one of the reasons I really wanted to hone in on Google Apps is the free element, because there's so many challenges that we face in the classroom, especially in ESL or even ABE, where we really struggle with students who have either limited digital literacy access, or maybe they do have the access, but they don't have the experience or haven't been had the chance to really learn the technology. So there are many different pitfalls that we face, especially as instructors in the classroom. So I just want to take a moment, a couple of minutes for you to write in the chat what are the biggest technology pitfalls in the classroom, or what are some frustrations that you've had within the classroom. So in the chat, what are the biggest technology pitfalls that you've had in the classroom? And what are some of the frustrations that you've also had? Okay, good. So I see a couple people saying internet connections, students not having computers, Chromebook sometimes limits student access, lack of dependable Wi-Fi, particularly at off-site locations. Someone says they teach online. Students often have internet issues. There's not a digital version of the textbook. Multiple students share one device. Yes, that's definitely an issue, especially if they're even if they have different devices and they happen to be in the same household, then you hear yourself echoing in the background. Tech failure, students not having devices, very true. More poor internet connections, the different levels. I'm guessing, Angela, you mean like the different levels of use. Lack of experience with logging into a computer. I can definitely testify that to that, Jesse, especially today. I had some students trying to log in. It took a whole hour. Connectivity, internet connections, incompatible systems, definitely. Some students having trouble using some of the features, device and apps not working together, Mac versus Windows. Students not having any access to devices. All right, so yes, a lot of Wi-Fi and connectivity issues, or not knowing how to work a computer, lack of experience. Equipment not working, definitely. All right, so there are a lot of very challenging things that probably most, if not all of us, have experienced in some capacity.
Marquita, let me just jump in for a quick sec. I see William has his hand raised.
Okay.
If it's at all possible, William, could you put your question either in the chat or the Q&A, if that's at all possible? Thanks. That's all.
No problem. All right. So thank you so much for sharing. So with this webinar, I really want to eliminate some of the guesswork that you have to go through prior to utilizing a new digital tool, and eliminating many of the concerns that you've had or experienced. So are my students skilled enough? So many of you said the skill level is just not there. Will they be able to use this new tool with ease? How will I be able to view their progress? So there's limitation even and with using some of the digital tools that we use. Will they know how to save and send the final product? So another hurdle, they might be able to use the technology, but is there a way for them to be able to send it to you, or do they even know how to follow those steps? Will I know how to model and use the tool? So very huge concern. So, in many ways, Google Apps can eliminate many of the frustrations that you might have and those hurdles in the classroom, both online and in person. Unfortunately, it will not eliminate, many of you mentioned internet connection. So I don't have a secret recipe for that, but I will talk about some of the other issues that people have had. All right, so one of the reasons why I love Google Apps is that it's very easy to use. So even if the student has low to almost no exposure to technology, it's pretty easy to model how to use the app. The reason why I pretty much exclusively use Google Apps is that it avoids those compatibility issues. So many of you mentioned not having compatibility between a Mac and a PC, maybe browser compatibility issues. For the most part, I haven't had those issues in using Google Apps. Also, the great thing about Google Apps is accessible from anywhere, pretty much at any time, as long as you have an internet connection. So it allows students to engage in digital literacy, regardless of their skill level. And it's great for students who have familiarity with the Microsoft suite, so including PowerPoint, even Excel, and students can use the web app in a browser. If for some reason, I know I've run into issues where students have too many things saved on their phones, or their phone like just literally does not have the capacity to hold an app, they can still actually use the app within a web browser if they're able to get to a web browser on their phone, if that's all they have. So I've had a plethora of experiences where usually it does work for most, if not all, students. All right, and then it also eliminates the horrible need of creating purchasing licensing, because certain products require that. Having to set up email accounts, so there's no login that's necessary. They can just get the link from you, go on there, and fill out the whatever information they need to in the app. And this is especially good for ESOL students who are already also dealing with a language barrier on top of the limited technology barrier. So the student does not have to have an email set up. Ideally, it would be good for them because you can then email them the link, but it doesn't, it's not necessary. Also, it helps with the language barrier situation. Students do not have to save or send a file to you. You already have access to the file, and it's very cost effective. So as instructors, we're always looking for ways that are cost effective, and free is the best one. So Google Apps can positively impact both virtual and face-to-face lesson planning and classroom management. So a couple of things that it allows you to do, it allows you to see your students working in real time. So it's helpful for both in-person and virtual interactions. And then you can gauge how much progress your students are making and adjust their allotted timeframes accordingly. So if you're seeing that students are wrapping up pretty quickly, and you can kind of move on to the next thing in your lesson. Or if you're seeing that students seem to be really struggling, or maybe you need to provide more clarification as to what they need to do in the assignment, you can also kind of gauge that from your students' progress. It also enables you to have real-time feedback to students. You have a comment feature on Google Apps, and you can also write directly into the file. So a perfect example of this happened to me last semester when I was doing an academic English class. My class is fairly huge and mostly ESOL students. And what I was trying to do is have one-on-one conferences with them on their writing. Well, I would run out of time every single time because we would get to talking and then they just want to talk and then I wouldn't have time for the other students. So one of the things I started doing was writing feedback directly into the file so that they could continue, so I could see what their writing idea was, give them some feedback, and they were able to get started or continue on their writing assignment without me ever having to stop what I was doing and spend 10, 15 minutes with that student. It also gives access to specific individuals or groups of students. And it also allows you to do individualized lesson planning. And it also allows you to create dynamic group projects as well. It also enables students to review materials that are already covered. So even if you feel like your students aren't ready to take that step and create materials, you can still use it for them to maybe review the materials you've already covered. So notes, slides, so that they can work on whatever your current assignment is. It's also a great way to collect data quickly and directly from students in real time. And it's a great way to check for understanding. And you can share research and information in real time. So example about that, in the same academic writing class, we watched a documentary about Hurricane Katrina, and then their next task was to go find as much research and information as they could online. So if they found a good resource, they would copy and paste that information or the link into a document that everyone in the class could see and use in their own papers. Also, it gives you a good and bad examples that you can use anonymously as a teaching moment. So because no one's name is specifically assigned to the document, you can very easily just pull examples from students writing without embarrassing anyone, as long as it's kind of generic, and it provides a good teaching moment, and it's one less thing you have to do in terms of coming up with examples in class. All right, so ways to use. So we're going to start out with Google Forms. So it's simple enough for ESOL beginners. I love using it for my beginners. It's great for surveys. It's great as a knowledge check. It's great for a simple quiz. And it's also great for collecting detailed information for learning goals. So one of the things, one of the challenges I faced in, again, academic writing was the class was so large, it was just impossible for me to be able to meet individually with every student. So what I ended up doing is translating those same questions I would ask the students and putting it into a survey and giving them time during class to complete the survey and following up with them if I needed any additional information. So this is an example of a form that I created for my ESOL pre-beginners. So it checked their understanding of terms like marital status. So it also checked their ability to use a form. So I believe that's like one of the kind of things we need to check off our list in terms of digital literacy. So most students were able to connect with the QR code on the screen. So I do a QR code of the Google form projected on the screen. And then for some reason, if a student could not get their phone to scan the QR code, then I was able to either text or email them the link to the form. So I want to kind of show you, hopefully this works. Let's see. Oh, okay, hold on. I don't know why it's giving me issues. Okay, no worries. So that's why I took a screenshot just in case there were any technology issues. So this is an example of one of the forms that I did. So this is actually what the responses look like for the students. So the cool thing is that you can see overall responses. So if you're trying to, maybe teach students how to read a graph, this is a great way to do that. You can also see individual responses as well. The other great thing about this, and something that I actually used very recently, is you can export this data into a CSV file so that it's compatible with Excel or Google Sheets. And you can also see the individual responses that way. So in students filling this out, I was able to determine if they had understanding about the marital status. So even though we had just covered it in class, many students had this wrong in terms of picking Mr., Mrs., Miss, and Ms. So the cool thing about the form is that you can clear out the responses for your next class, or you can just copy the form and save it, as a different name for another class. And also there can be multiple collaborators. So say you're collaborating with another teacher, maybe organizations, that you can give them access to that form as well to edit it and view the results. And then something that I did in last week's class is that I actually took a snapshot of the results and threw them on a Google slide and used the data from the class to ask the students questions based upon the grammar that we had covered for that day. So when at the beginning of COVID, when it first hit, I was actually teaching a beginner's class. So there's that huge language barrier as well as the technology barrier. So one of the things that I did was create a quiz online for the students to do through Google Forms. So it would basically, you could set up the answers to kind of score them automatically. So the students would find out right away if they did well or if they needed some more practice. So I used this form based upon the things that we covered on Zoom, kind of as like an after a follow-up, kind of like homework. And this is what I mentioned earlier about setting up a student goals form that eliminated the time that I needed to spend on each individual student and discussing their goals. And so for the entrepreneurship class that I taught with LCMC, I actually created an evaluation since it's a pilot class, one didn't exist. So I kind of just threw one together and students were able to give their feedback. Just a note, in order to make it an anonymous evaluation, so students don't feel intimidated, you can set up the form without requesting an email so that students can still fill it out and you're not aware of which specific student completed it. But it will allow you to see how many responses. So if you have 10 students in the class and they say they filled out the survey, you can very easily see only 6 of them did. All right, so with Google Forms, I want you to say in the chat, what are some ways you can see yourself using this tool in your classroom? Or if you're not in the classroom, maybe as a support within your role. Okay, Elizabeth had a great point. One reminder, if you don't want it to be anonymous, is to don't ask for the student's name on the survey. I've definitely made that mistake. Luckily, it's very easy to just go in and kind of delete that question. Okay, Peg says she'll use it in writing class. Hannah says she'll use it as a writing and grammar portfolio for intensive English. Attendance tracking, yes, Katie, we definitely use it for that too, for quizzes, quick knowledge check, conduct surveys, give quizzes. Yes, they make great conversation starters from the data. Let's see, reading quizzes, good. Get opinions, great. exit ticket to assess. Let's see, forms are good for enrollment and feedback. Yes, I've seen more and more the forms being used on the admin side. Use citizenship, cram studying. Okay, great. Against text surveys, using a particular grammar target. Good. Evaluation. Let's see. Okay, how to use this with pre-ESL. My students are at a really basic level and learning how to do greetings. They're just starting. So Yolanda, I've used it in at least 3 or 4 of my pre-beginners, and usually it will do it like after we talk about first names, last names, phone number, email address, and like female, male, non-binary. So it's very simple. I try to keep it as simple as possible for them, and it's only information that we've actually covered. So they get to see their responses on the screen, and it's very limited data, but I found it very useful and it's very engaging for the students. Yolanda, I hope that helps. Someone said lessons. Yes, you can set it up for students to receive a copy of their responses, which is great if they are creating a portfolio, math quizzes, goal setting, surveys to collect data, warm up for math, activate background knowledge. Let's see. How do you keep that information secure? Katie, you can go, so that's a little bit more complicated. So if they're filling in more sensitive information, then I would say you would have to have the email. You can have, if the students have a Gmail, you can make it required that they're logged in as themselves to be able to access the form. I don't know in the background how secure or what Google's parameters and privacy things are in the background though, but I know that's one way to kind of cut it off. You basically, you can give access to just a select number of people and not just, making it public for everyone, which I'll show you toward the end. All right, thank you so much for your responses. Great responses. All right, so Google Slides. So I've used Google Slides for both individual and group presentations. I've used it to present, to do research, show research, or also to review content with the students. So it's been great for breakout groups. It gives your TA or another instructor access to content for discussion. So for example, I do have a pre-beginners online class that I do on Zoom. I'm fortunate enough to have a TA. So what we end up doing, since it's a class of about 15 or more students, which is kind of big for a pre-beginner class, we actually split them down the middle to maximize the amount of time they have in practicing the conversations or the pronunciation or whatever the task is. I've definitely used Google Slides for breakout groups and have them write sentences, for example, using different adverbs and having them collaborate together in the breakout rooms. So typically I try to give kind of rules, especially if it's like a group project, that they need to choose someone to present. Someone can be the writer or the navigator of the slide. So it does require you to kind of show the student how to share their screen, which is something you can practice doing in the big group before you go into the breakout groups. Also, the great thing about this too is that you can add additional tasks. So if you have a group that is much slower, much faster, than the rest of the groups, then what I usually do is I'll still give them the content that's covered from the other groups so that if they finish early, then they can start working on the other content. Even though that's not the content they're responsible for, they're still learning and they're not twiddling their thumbs until the time is up. You can also import from PowerPoint as well. So one of my favorite uses was in my academic English class, and which was predominantly ESL students too. But for example, I would create the first slide, kind of what group it was, so I could keep track, and then giving them an instruction slide, and then the next slide being the actual activity. So choose the correct word, find the definitions for the incorrect words, and so they would work together. And usually, to make it super easy, I will leave rectangles at the end of the sentences, just in case, you know, they don't know how to create a rectangle. That way, all they literally need to do is just click and drag the rectangle over to the correct answer. And then always have a slide in there. If you finish early, work on the other slides. Another thing I did in academic English, so they were supposed to, they could either use, so I gave them choices. They could either use the arrows, so I would put a few arrows over here and literally clicking and dragging, or if the students were a little bit more advanced or they wanted to be a little bit fancier, they could also opt to highlight according to the colors on the right, but it was not required. I love this, using Google Slides as a way for to recap on information that was covered in a previous class, so you're not spending a lot of time reviewing, just creating a simple chart for the students to fill out. And so it's also a great way to use to get feedback and reflection. Like I came up with the idea of just having them, what did they learn? What will they do differently next time? What would you do the same? So this was regarding the writing process. They had spent a lot of time doing peer reviews and different things like that. So I just wanted to get some feedback from the students, and they worked in groups and kind of came up with the feedback together. All right, so what are some ways you see yourself using this tool in your classroom? Please write the answers in the chat. Okay, someone's used it to present content, also assign students to make presentations. Great. In connection with, I think it's Ellie and Burlington English from my ESL students. Okay, someone said they love the idea of identifying parts of speech. When students write on a slide, is it individual or all? Okay, so Eileen, it's everyone who has access to the file. So usually I give access just to that particular group. So I'll drop the link for the group in their breakout room, and just those students have access. So if the students want to collaborate and just have one student type, they can, or if they want to split up the work and simultaneously type, they're able to do that as well. Okay, someone said they love the idea using it for activities. Vocabulary, definitely. Yes, vocabulary, recalling and preloading. Yes, great. Angela says she's for her presentation. Yes, it definitely helps in keeping the students engaged. Also makes them responsible for their learning as well. Someone to have students interact with the lesson. Okay, idea of leaving some artifacts and slides for students to manipulate. Okay, good. Student presentations, vocabulary presentations. Yes, homework is great for this one. To introduce the topic, great. All of the above, activator, reflection, group activity, presentation. Creating open and live discussion forums to introduce new ideas and review feedback. from one another to build comprehension in difficult subjects. So practice grammar rules, let students match sentences with images. Great. Yes, lesson presentation. Let's see. So you have lots of links and copies of the same activity. Yes. So it's pretty easy to copy, Eileen, the document in Google, on Google Drive. And then I think in one of my slides toward the end, I kind of show you how to do that. So you can definitely copy the same activity blank and have different links for it. Let's see. All right. Yep. Let's see, have used it more to present, not for students to manipulate. Choice board works too. All right, introduce ideas. Okay, Elizabeth, yes, I definitely teach beginners and a lot of them are older beginners. So they definitely need large type on the screen, including myself included. All right. So, so Google Docs. So I love Google Docs. So I first started using slides in the form, but I couldn't really figure out how to use Google Docs. And for the first time, I used them in my writing class last semester. So I was able to create writing journals for the students, create individual assignments as well. You can add chapters. So if you're really having, especially with beginner or pre-beginner students or students who have little to no exposure to digital literacy, it really eliminates the need to use a learning management system like Canvas or Moodle, which can be a nightmare to have to try to walk students through what is a login, and you kind of skip all of that craziness and can go just straight to the assignment without any need to have them log into something. So for example, in academic English, I had them do their resumes in Google Docs, do their narratives. Everything was part of a single document. So literally all you have to do on the left-hand side is click on whichever one. So we have Hurricane Katrina essay, personal narrative outline, personal narrative draft. So I learned this after I created this for the first time. So when I used it for the first time, I did not create the chapters. And then I realized after the fact the chapters would have helped everyone much more. So that was kind of an afterthought, but you can definitely create it without the chapters and always add them later. But depending on the size of your class, that can be kind of tedious as you'll have to go into each individual journal. So for my high beginners, I've definitely used this for writing sentences during class time. So literally all it was, I dropped a picture and then they had to write questions and answers. So I gave them an example of what they needed to write, and then they would just scroll down and write the answers below. Again, you can include the instructions, reminders, and pictures. So this is great for pre-beginners. All right, so that was kind of a short one, but what are some ways do you see yourself using this tool? If you do, and please write your answers in the chat. Hey, Betsy, I would like to assign my students to try to create them. That would be great steps for that, definitely. Let's see, I would like use this tool as a way. Yes, for essay prompts. Yes, great. Yes, Angela, is like the best thing ever. And it cut down the amount of me having to kind of navigate the LMS system. I could just literally open up the document in Google Drive. Okay, having sentences write sentences based upon a photo. Share doc for grammar exercises. Good. All right. Yes. To make a class story. That would be great. That would be really good. Let's see. Guidance with resumes, writing about family, journal writing, writing sentences and paragraphs on a topic. Okay, we do share writings and students can reference the session later. Great. Yes, I love all of those ideas. Yeah, I think I'm definitely gonna try the story idea, like that collaborative story. Very good. All right. All right, so Google Sheets. So I don't use Google Sheets as much. I've mainly used it for entrepreneurship. I teach our pilot class that I teach with LCMC. So it became a great way to not only organize resources for these students, but also we were able to create an actual workbook on how to write a business plan. So we break it down into parts, marketing versus funding and different things like that. So this ended up working really well with that group. So I've only tested this particular app on higher level students. So I can't speak for lower level students because I feel like Sheets is not as friendly as some of the other ones. It's can be a little bit intimidating. So definitely, if you have any ideas for your lower level students, let me know. I'll be interested into hearing that. So you can create resources, workbooks, you can create links. What I realized more recently with one of the cycles I did with the business class was that you can actually import workbooks at a later time. So even though you create the original template, if for some reason, you see students really struggling on maybe their target market, then I would go in and create in the main document, create a tab at the bottom, and then import that into the students' workbooks. Okay, so as I mentioned, we created additional tabs throughout the course. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out if there's a way to hide or lock tabs. I don't think unless it's something that they're not going to edit, I believe you can lock it. But if it is something they are going to be able to edit, then it's better to add the tab later in time. So you always have those students who want to work ahead, or you can add the tab and just leave it blank and then just simply go in and import the information later. Okay, so this is pretty brief because it's the one I've used the least. But if you see what are some ways that you see yourself using this tool in your classroom? You can share your answers in the chat, please. Okay, someone said they track enrollment sheets. Yes, I definitely use this for attendance at many places. Okay. Learning how to demonstrate how to navigate the software for student literary improvement. Good. You can set permissions for sheets, both on whole sheets, individual tabs, and specific fields. Okay, Chris, I will definitely have to have you show that to me because I was not successful oh, yeah, I think I know what you mean, and particularly in the attendance. Okay, I just wasn't able to get it to do what I wanted, I guess, for my particular project. SIRS, vocabulary, virtual. Hey, great. All right, so just quickly, just an overview of how to set it up. You definitely need a Google account as a teacher, but again, your students do not need a Google account. So your content, you can add to Google Drive, your Google Docs, slides, sheets, or forms in advance. So you can set this up all in advance and determine how you want to share the access. So do you want the students just to be able to view, so like as a read only, or do you want to enable the students to be able to edit it as an editor? So you can choose specific students, like for something like the student's journal, I made sure only I and the other student had specific access to their journal. Whereas in groups, usually you can just create a link and send them the link, or you can, again, add individuals if you like. So restricted access, it's very easy to change this back and forth. So if you realize, I'm not going to use this after all, or let me just lock it until next week, or you want to go and edit it, you can always switch the access very quickly. So as I mentioned, you can type in a particular person and make them the editor. You can also notify them in the message. Now, what I will say about this is this feature works maybe 50 to 75% of the time. Sometimes the students don't always get the request. So what I end up doing is either sending if I'm on Zoom, sending it to them in a private message, or just simply copying their link and emailing it to them directly. So any one of those ways work. I always try to send it this way first, and then if the student says they did not receive it, then I'll just send it manually send them the link via email. Okay, so this is an example of just general access. So anyone on the internet can view who has the link. So that it's just viewer. So if you have content, some of you mentioned vocabulary, where you do not want the student to have the ability to edit your slides or information, then you would just set it to viewer, and then you can copy the link. You can either email this to all students or just copy a link, drop it in the chat, or even if you have a LMS like Moodle or Canva, you can Canvas, you can drop it on there. Let's see. Right, and again, you can adjust it at any point in time. It's up to you. And you can also have other owners as well. So if you're collaborating within your organization, you can always add other owners who have access to edit as well. And this is just an overview. So general access, so anyone with the link can gain access. Viewer, they can only view the content, they can't make changes. Commenter, they can add comments but cannot make changes. So this actually might be a really good one for if you have students doing peer review for like their writing. And then editor, they can view and edit the content. So just a couple of tips and reminders. Remember to, if you're going to have students edit, to set the sharing setting to editor under the share button. Otherwise, students will not be able to edit the document. So sometimes I do forget. So usually what I do if I'm in a Zoom, on a Zoom class, will go into the breakout room, drop the link into their chat, and just wait for a couple seconds until they're actually able to open it, and just make sure I'll say, hey, can you edit the document? Great, and then keep moving. Also, if you want to share a view only file with the class, you still have to change it from restricted access. So just be mindful of that. Forums actually also must have their sharing settings set up. Sorry, that's weird. And then of course, always have a backup plan because disasters happen. So with any technology, we always want to have a backup. All right, so I'm not sure. Okay, so with my last couple minutes. All right, so I want you to kind of test it for yourself. We don't have time to create a whole new document, but I'll just very quickly show you how easy it is to create one, because I've definitely created these like a few minutes sometimes before class if I get like a bright idea at the last minute. VTI. Okay, so then once I'm done, well, of course, title it VTI, and then I come up here and hit share. So I just change this to anyone with the link. And then since I want you to be able to go in and edit, I'll change it to editor. And then I just come in and copy the link and click done. So in the chat, if you want to try it, you can open it up. You kind of see what it looks like as the teacher on the teacher side, what it looks like for people to access it on your end. So if a couple of you can at least go into it, and I can kind of show them what it looks like at the top of the document when another student is viewing the document. So if you could please click the link in the chat. Okay, so great. So someone accessed it, so I can see them up here. So unfortunately, unless your students are logged in, like under Google, you're not going to know whose name it is. But in an event of, say, a breakout group, I know once I've put that link in the breakout group's chat, I know at least one of them can open it, so we're good. You don't see it? Okay, hold on. Can't see the link? Huh. Okay, hold on. Oh, yeah, I think, Laura, is it possible for you to put the link in the group chat? It's only allowing me to send it to hosts and panelists. Okay, thank you.
Good catch. Yeah, just did. Whoever caught that.
All right, so now you see how many students, quote unquote students, are accessing the document at the same time. And as you can see, multiple people can go in and edit. So it can get a little crazy. So that's why I usually limit like my groups to maybe 5 students at max, and usually tell them to assign a writer or 2 that's actually going to edit the document so it doesn't get too crazy. Because see, some of you are adding slides. Yeah, so this is kind of an example of what happens. Again, it's a great way to kind of see progress. So you're literally spying on your students as they're working, so you can see how they're collaborating or seeing if your instructions were made well. And as you can see, 36 people are in there now. So, all right. So, all right. Any questions? I want to leave the last couple minutes for any questions or maybe other suggestions of how this would work in your classroom, or maybe how you've used a particular Google app. Someone wrote, this has the potential to be fun. Great. Okay, someone added a comment. Cool. Very nice. Eileen, you said you couldn't. William, I use Google Docs because of licensing issues. So not everyone is set up to have the proper licensing. At least that's the way I believe. Unless Office works differently, please tell me. But I use Google Docs because universally people, it's just more accessible. It's more accessible to the most amount of students you have, and the students do not have to have the app. They can do it through the web. And I know with some organizations that web browser access is only available per the licensing limitations. Okay. Eileen, I'm not sure what you were doing wrong. Okay, someone said, I found MS Word is much better tool than Google Docs for embedding and manipulating photos. Elizabeth, I'm not sure. Again, I use these apps specifically because of the licensing, right? Thank you for resources. So a couple couldn't add your names. I'm not sure why, but I can do the sharing link again. So you just hit this share button and then you come down here and change the access. So the first access is anyone with the link and it's viewer. And then to change from viewer to commenter to editor, you just select the role, hit copy link, and you just paste it anywhere you want to paste the link. Yep, Hillary, definitely. So it automatically saves and it saves to your drive. So it's not saved, the student doesn't have to have a Google Drive. Okay, a couple of you are having issues adding your names. I'm not sure why. Oh, thank you. Have a happy Valentine's Day, MJ. Thank you. All right, any other questions or concerns? You're welcome, William. Okay, Christine, were you able to see the share link slide again? Okay. Oh yeah, Susan, I agree. I always back up if it's like something super important. I always make sure I have a backup for that. So that's why I'm really careful on restricting the access. Version history. I've actually never used version history, Hillary. That's great. All right, you're welcome. Okay. Like to create various things. Okay, great. All right.
Well, thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marquita, for being here and presenting. I think the question was asked about getting the slides, and we will distribute to the participants forthcoming. But hope everyone has a great Valentine's Day, and thank you so much, Marquita. We really appreciate your experience and exposure in these areas.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. Bye.